Thank you for joining eTitle and Orland's PC for today's webinar, Florida Homestead from a Realtor's Point of View. My name is Connie Kinzer. It is my pleasure to introduce our esteemed speaker for today, Jessica Morris. Jessica is a licensed attorney in the state of Florida for Orland's PC, as well as a member in good standing with the Southern, Middle, and Northern U.S. District Courts. She concentrates her practice in real estate, litigation, foreclosure, and REO. And I now turn it over to Jessica.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today as we talk about Florida Homestead from a realtor's point of view. Now, as we go through these slides, I just wanted to point out that I've really kind of tailored this webinar to you as realtors. So keep that in mind as we walk through this presentation. And what can you expect from today's presentation? Today, at the conclusion of this webinar, you should understand the history and the basics of homestead in Florida, learn important milestones and dates, and also how to use the knowledge that you gain today to excel as a buyer's agent. So, Florida Homestead, what is it? Let's first dive into a little bit of the history. So the Florida Save Our Homes Amendment went into effect in 1995, and its intent was to protect Florida residents from being priced out of their homes. So think about a lot of retirees that come to Florida and they're on a fixed income and they purchase a home, or they've lived in Florida and they've paid off their mortgage, and now they are solely responsible for paying their annual taxes and insurance. Taxes in Florida go up all the time, and it would be very difficult for a lot of these people to be able to afford the taxes as they make these giant leaps as our property values continue to be at an all-time high. So that was the intent. And what it does is it limits the annual increase in the assessed value of homestead properties for tax purposes to 3%. So that means that a person's property taxes cannot increase more than 3% every year. A little bit more about the homestead exemption. Florida residents are eligible for this only on their primary residence. It's very important. It can't be on a vacation home or an investment. It has to be a primary residence. It is also important to remember that it reduces the assessed value of the property, not current market value. And on top of that, it provides for a deduction of $25,000 for the school taxing authority and $50,000 for all other taxing authorities. In order to be eligible, a Florida resident must own and occupy their home as their permanent residence on January 1st of the year claiming. And it's important to keep that in mind because, as you know, in Florida, we pay our taxes in arrears. So it's great in theory, but how does it work? So for this purpose and for the remainder of this presentation, we're actually going to use a real life example of a property I pulled from the property appraiser's website. But to keep anonymity, we're going to refer to it as 123 Main Street. So this may look familiar to you, it may not, but you will see you want to focus on the 2021 certified, as that is basically the taxes that have already been calculated and the tax bill has already been sent out. You will want to ignore the 2022 because that obviously is in progress. As I mentioned before, we pay our taxes in arrears. We don't know who's going to live in the property come January 1st, 2022. So that's why it says see below, and some of those numbers are not exact. So going back to that middle column is what we're going to focus on. So we're going to first focus on the market value. So for hypothetical purposes, if this house were to go on the market today, we're going to assume that it would be listed at market value, and that is $493,725, roughly $500,000. Now, this property is only being assessed at $121,123 because the person that lives in this house has had this home homesteaded since they moved in, which I believe was in the late 70s. So as the just market values went up, their assessed value did not go along with that because of the Florida Save Our Homes tax, or excuse me, Florida Save Our Homes amendment. On top of that, they also get the additional exemptions of the $50,000, which leaves them with a taxable value of their homestead property of $71,123. That's a lot of numbers. It can get a little overwhelming. So let's see the math, because when it comes down to it, people want to know what they're saving. So we're going to use that same house, 123 Main Street, that was around $423,000. So without the homestead exemptions, the annual taxes that would be due would be $10,059.15. The current taxes due to all of those homestead exemptions for 123 Main is only $1,449. That is a savings of $8,600 per year at minimum from here on out. As long as Joe, we'll call him Joe, lives in 123 Main, he will save at minimum $8,600 every single year. And that is a significant amount of money for people on a fixed income, or well, for anyone really. So that's great, but what if Joe wants to move? He has all these tax savings, all these tax benefits. What happens now? Enter portability. Portability is a really cool concept that I personally love, and I love when I see people move from homestead to homestead, and I'm able to look back and see how much money they've saved over the years by owning primary residence in Florida. So the basics of portability: if moving from a previous Florida homestead to a new homestead, residents may be able to transfer, or what we call port, all or part of their assessment difference. Now, it's important to remember, and as realtors, you need to remember this: a Florida resident must establish a new homestead within 2 years of January 1st of the year they moved from their previous homestead. So it's not 2 years, it's 2 years from January 1st of the calendar year that they moved from their previous homestead. And when they go to apply for their homestead at the county's, at the property appraiser's office, they will need to fill out not only a homestead application, but also a transfer of homestead assessment difference. And the deadline to do that is, of course, March 1st. So, great in theory. Again, let's see how this works in real life. So we're going to go back to 123 Main Street. And in order to calculate the portability, we're going to take the difference of the market value, which is the market value today, which is the $493,000, and we're going to subtract the assessed value to come up with how much difference remains as our portability amount. And that is already calculated right here. And that is a portability amount of $372,000. That is significant. So how does this work in real life? We're going to take a look at some math now. Let's say that there is another home up the street, and the new home market value is $650,000. Anyone else, say someone coming from another state, moving into this property, they're not porting any homestead, and it's not their homestead, say it's an investment, their annual taxes due would roughly be $13,000. Now, let's say Joe wanted to move from his previous homestead at 123 Main Street to this new house. Let's take a look at what that looks like. So, new home market value, $650,000. We calculate and subtract the $372,000. Then that brings the assessed value to $277,000 and some change. So with all of those taken into consideration, including that additional $50,000, the annual taxes for Joe would be $4,808. That is a significant amount. That is a savings of $8,400 every year at minimum. Now, I know a lot of you are thinking that's great when people are buying, more expensive, bigger houses. But what happens when people downsize, which is very common in the state of Florida? You often have people with elderly people or parents having their children, empty nest. What happens in that situation is if the new home has a lower market value, the benefit transfer is proportional. So it's a percentage. They will take the percentage of portability and apply that to the new lower home price. Now, we've kind of gone over portability. We're going to do a little bit of extra credit now for all of you realtors out there that work specifically or sometimes with buyers. And this is incredibly important. I'm going to do some realtor tips. Beware of a tax increase for your buyer if purchasing a long-term homesteaded home. So what does that mean? Say you have a buyer in the market for Joe's home over at 123 Main Street. The actual taxes that are due for 2021 are $1,449. The new annual taxes, because your buyer for 2022 would lose that homestead credit, especially if they're coming from out of state and they're not porting their own sort of homestead savings. Their new annual taxes for 2022 would be $10,000. And that is a huge increase. And it's really important that you keep an eye on that as a buyer's agent, because from what I've learned, realtors tend to have clients for life. They love to have repeat customers that come back for buying and selling their homes throughout the different stages of life. And they're going to be really annoyed and really irritable if that first year, if they're super content with their nice low taxes, and then the following year they get hit with a tax bill for 10 grand. So you may want to warn them just to give them a heads up. On the flip side, if you have someone in the market to buy 123 Main Street and they are hoping to qualify to pay for it, since it's a long time homesteaded home, it could potentially be much easier to qualify. So what I mean by that is you have a buyer, they've been pre-qualified by their lender or their mortgage broker, and they know that they cannot have a monthly payment that goes any higher than $2,000. Well, this person really wants to buy 123 Main Street. Now, if we go off of the current value, estimated insurance of $2,500 for the year, and the taxes of $10,000, which is realistically what their payment would be down the road, we're looking at an estimated payment of $2,700 a month, which is well above that $2,000. So they, of course, would be declined. Now, if we go back to the same house with $493,725 and the annual insurance at $2,500, and we use the current taxes, which is typically what our lenders use when calculating out the payment and whether or not a borrower will qualify for a home. With this situation and the taxes being so low, it would work out to a monthly payment of $1,994, which is right under that target of $2,000 per month. So they, of course, would be approved. Now, this is kind of a love-hate thing, because yes, it can be great when getting your buyer qualified for a new home, as long as you let them know or are aware of the fact that the following year their payment's going to go up roughly $700 due to the increase in those taxes when they're reassessed. So keep that in mind, because you don't want to have an angry client. But it's also positive as long as they know that, say you have a husband and a wife that can afford it, they just want to purchase it under one of their names. This can help them qualify to do that and also be comfortable with that payment down the road. So as you can see, it's a lot of math. It's a lot of a lot of working through some figures and figuring out what people can and can't afford, along with, the figures from the mortgage broker or lender. So it's just something to keep in mind. And at that point, we have reached the end of our webinar, and I hope that you learned something about Homestead and are able to take some of this back as you work with your clients and implement some of the tips that you've learned today to continue to be a successful realtor. And if you have any questions, feel free to visit us at orleans.com or etitleagency.com.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, everyone, for attending today's webinar. We hope you have a great day.